My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, St. Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, Jesus, we want to start our time of prayer today by listening to the Gospel, to hear what you have to speak to us today. Jesus said to his disciples, "Which of you, with a servant ploughing or minding sheep, would say to him when he returned from the fields, 'Come and have your meal immediately'? Would he not be more likely to say, 'Get my supper laid, make yourself tidy and wait on me till I eat and drink. You can eat and drink yourself afterwards'? Must he be grateful to the servant for doing what he was told? So with you, when you have done all you have been told to do, say, 'We are merely servants. We have done no more than our duty.'" Now, in truth, probably most of us are completely unfamiliar with the world of servants and slaves. At least I hope so, for the vast majority of us. Though we might consider ourselves to be the servants of the Lord in a kind of a spiritual sense, but we don't eagerly seek out ways to be in servitude to other people, let's say, or certainly to be enslaved to anybody. We have fought very hard for the freedom of individuals and for the freedom of their conscience so as to not be enslaved in any way. And so we have to try and pick under the surface a little bit of what you're saying to us in the Gospel today, Jesus, because in one sense we understand that it's a good and wholesome thing to be of service to other people, but we instantly sort of reject the notion of being the servant, let's say, or the slave of anybody. And yet that is what you are calling the disciples to be in this gospel passage from Luke today. Well, the first thing that sort of came to my mind as I was reading this gospel and thinking about servants was when I was a good bit younger than I am now and was at home eating my dinner. And at the end of the dinner, a very nice dinner usually that my mother or my father had prepared, my brother and I would just get up from the table and then plonk ourselves down on the couch, probably to watch television. And obviously did not bring our plates or glasses up to the sink. So I'm not even talking about washing the dishes. I'm just saying leaving the things sitting on the table. And my father, to make the point, would come and stand between ourselves, my brother and myself, and the television and say, "Oh, you two must think you're in the hotel again, do you?" I'm laughing because it's probably not that far distant past that this has happened again. But the point was that, of course, when you're in a hotel, you just get up from the table at the end of the meal. Especially if somebody else is paying for your meal, you literally have no contribution whatsoever to the tidying up. And you might say thank you to the staff as you're leaving, but nobody's expecting you to pick up your plate and take it to the kitchen, and certainly not to wash the dishes yourself. But that, of course, is different in your own family home. There's a certain obligation that you might say upon just kind of being a good child or helping out at home. And so the point was that my parents are certainly not the slaves of their children. And so we ought to have helped out and done little things in order to show our appreciation, not only of what we had received, but also to just do what was our duty. That's what Jesus is talking about also in the Gospel today. Now, of course, between parents and children, there is probably a great deal of unpaid labour that just has to happen, in order for family life to function normally, that parents will often just put themselves at the service of their children, or husbands to their wives, for the sake of, or wives to their husbands, indeed, for that matter, for the sake of a home functioning as it should. And there is a certain degree in which that unpaid labour, let's call it for the sake of argument, or goodwill, you might say, is needed in order to just live a normal life, that people will do the duties that are expected of them, even if they never get a thanks for it. You think of lots of opportunities that you have on a constant basis in order to be of some help to other people by tidying up the house, by even doing things that are not necessarily your responsibility, but because it just helps life function easier. And one is not the servant or the slave of the other. You think of doing little tasks at home to help out your parents, or tidying up your room, or tidying up the garden, and think of autumn at this time of year when leaves are everywhere, and it might be helpful to just take out a brush and brush up those leaves. And that doesn't mean that you are a slave of your parents because you are doing something which is kind of manual labor, so to speak, and you're not going to be paid for it, but you do it on the basis of the fact that it is a good thing to do, or because we are grateful for all of the other kind of benefits in kind that we have received. And so we might be of service to somebody else, especially somebody whom we love, because we appreciate everything else that they have done for us. In other words, we might help out because we're grateful for what we have received. Now, again, we're getting a little bit closer here to, I think, what Jesus is talking about in the gospel, because we can understand that we might want to be of service or of help to you, Jesus, or to your church, because we acknowledge that, we receive a lot of benefit in kind. And it's not that we are in servitude, but we want to offer something of concrete help in order to, make the church function easier, or in order to be a better disciple, that I might be of some concrete service whenever that is needed. Let's stretch the analogy a little bit, thinking about family relations and that kind of whole world of unpaid labor for the sake of goodness, to what happens in the workplace. Our co-workers are most certainly not our slaves. Even if you're the boss, these people are there to do an honest day's work. And they're not slaves of anybody else, because usually there is some sort of remuneration as part of their service, in order that they're paid for the work that they do. And if the work we do is of kind of genuine use, then that payment is right and just. But recently I visited a friend who started out in a new job. And he wasn't the only one starting out in a new job. He'd been there for a few weeks, and you could tell that some of the new co-workers were just maybe not completely up to speed yet on what the job entailed. And that's frustrating at times, whenever you're hoping that somebody's going to do their job better than they currently are. But it demands an awful lot of patience. Now, again, a co-worker's not a slave, so you can't take out a stick and start beating them because they're not doing the job perhaps just exactly in the way that you want. And we have to be a little bit more mannerly about it and try to encourage and help and support. But we're all trying to kind of do the best job that we possibly can. And when it's a co-worker, then, this is a real opportunity that we have to help somebody to do their job better, or to encourage them to do their job better by giving a good example, or helping them whenever we see that they're struggling in any way. Okay, so let's put that back into what we're talking about in the gospel. Well, we might want to be a better Christian, we might want to be a better service to Jesus and to the church, but we acknowledge here that this takes a lot of patience on the part of you, Jesus, because more often than not, just like my friend struggling with his co-worker, we're just not up to the scratch. And we acknowledge whenever we get this little insight, Jesus, that perhaps, maybe I don't put in the effort that I do. Maybe I need to give more of myself in my prayer, more of myself in my service of you, whatever it is. But I acknowledge that there's a heck of a lot of patience there. Now, all of these things are kind of skirting around the surface of what we must do for you, Jesus. That the things that we are obliged to do for you. Because we are your servants, whether we find that uncomfortable or not. We have to be in service to you, Jesus, if we want to be your disciple. And you give us a lot of commands at times in the Bible that we are obliged to follow through. To worship you primarily. To honor you with all of our heart, our mind, and our soul, and to set aside time in order to do that on a daily, if not a weekly basis, to worship you as you deserve to be worshipped. Also, we are obliged to live in a kind of a moral life, to be holy as our Heavenly Father is holy, and to live by charity, to love one another as I have loved you. These are what you say to us, and these things you say to us in your word. Jesus, help us to be a better servant. Help us to be of some concrete service. And perhaps in a very physical manifestation of that might be in this month of November to pray for the holy souls, recognizing that these are the servants that have gone before us, that they were just exactly like us, and now that we can do something for them, something which is unseen, something which is not likely to gain any immediate reward for ourselves, but is of infinite value to them. This is our duty, to pray for the holy souls that they might get to heaven, and that we might do so as an act of worship of you. Jesus, help us to see that we are merely your servants, and that we must do what is our duty, and to do it lovingly, because of all that you have given to us. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me during this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, St. Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.